Junet to say what he did, but then also Junet should have watched the language he was using. So it's a reflection of what's going on in the country. There's lack of decorum in political discourse, such that people are saying all sorts of things. And if you go to social media, you realize that if there is anything called rude language, then you'll find it on social media. Yeah. Very rude, and our youngsters are also on that social media. They're actually thinking that rude language is normal. It's the in thing. But we should look at the whole problem globally. What is actually causing this is because in 2021 we are going to have a transition of the leadership of the country. Now, if we are going to have a transition, why all this vitriol? It's because Kenya is one huge criminal enterprise. And whenever there's a change of guard in a criminal enterprise, there's a lot of bloodbath. And Kenya being a criminal enterprise, because remember I said last time that Kenya is not a democracy, it's a kleptocracy. So whoever gets there, so it's like a criminal enterprise, a mafia house. Yeah. When you are trying to change leadership, there's a lot of bloodbath, there are no rules. No holds barred, everybody's just fighting for that space. And that is what's happening right now. So we should look at it globally and realize that actually what we are witnessing now is a change of guard in a criminal enterprise. Okay. And that's why it's so volatile. That's why in Kenya, every attempt at change of leadership of this criminal enterprise is usually so violent. It's usually so, it invokes such profound emotions, because it is, and unless we Kenyans accept and face it, that we are running a criminal enterprise, and each of us is trying to get a footing into that enterprise, and that is what. And when there's a change of guard, like is anticipated in 2022, we want to see who will be at the top of that enterprise, and that is why we are having this kind of negative
what plays
politics
out here in terms of communication and how some of these words are echoed out is the question of sensitivity, the question of time. I'd just love to understand, in line with communication, just how best, especially in the field of politics, should one communicate? Just what are some of the things that they need to look out for as they go out there to speak or to sell their political agendas?
It narrows down to what I would call emotional intelligence. Okay. That even as I want to isolate Isaac Mwaura and say that he has drunk jik, he has bleached himself, I must have that presence of mind to know that I'm going to be touching on very many other people, that I'm going into very sensitive space. It's not the first time, and we are not the only people in the world where leaders tread insolence. But it ought to be possible to say something to your opponent, your strategical competitor, without being nasty. I recall it's always been said of a lady MP who said to Winston Churchill, "Sir Winston, if I was your wife, I would put poison in your drink." And Churchill said, "If I was your husband, I would drink it." It's heavy, but it's been done in a nice manner, with a sense of decency and decorum. But to advance this a little further, from Dr. Selesmew, it's not just a kleptocracy, it is a kakistocracy, whereby kakistocracy, we are talking about rule by the worst elements possible of society. And in our country today, if we wanted to be honest with ourselves, because we must be, before we can heal this thing and recover, we must accept that we are busy experimenting with the warlord's institution. That the elite political class is a class that is composed of bands of warlords.
Yeah.
And each one of these warlords, they're either warlords already or warlords in the making. Mm-hmm. They try to have around them a satellite of junior politicians and other political lackeys and caddies. Okay. And within that class, there is competition to attract the master's attention. Okay. That you are the biggest defender of the faith in the master. And so you stop at nothing. And you have seen when these people do these things, nobody upbraids them. Nobody says anything about them. The master, the grand master,
okay.
The grand master does not say anything about them, even when they fight at a funeral, which is a very grave matter, as we said.
Probably this is going to be said in their own meetings, like we're expecting today, because that's what I was asking myself. Why would you do this for the sake of the master who sits there and watches you and probably does not even go out there to loud or celebrate that?
I don't think so. Maybe Mheshimiwa Selisimi can tell us.
What happens within these meetings, these private meetings?
In a situation like that,
yes.
I would expect what was the master, who speaks last.
Yes.
When he gets up to speak, he should be able to admonish that person and tell that person that what you just said is wrong and you should not say it again.
Well, I had members of county assemblies the other week, yeah, and some of them were trying to dig so hard to get to know what really happened in Sagana. And probably Honorable Kagusha should be able to tell us whether he attended the meeting. And some of these things that were said in secrecy, or so to speak, because they say during a private setup, because they say, well, there was that private meeting, or so to speak. And so sometimes maybe it is at this point that the master will say, congratulations, you're doing well, you're coming up well, and probably encourage you to do that more.
Yeah, well, I think what happened in Sagana is the president was trying to bring together the community as a president and also as a regional kingpin of Mount Kenya. He's trying to bring together the leaders and help them hopefully to talk in the same language. Of course, maybe the challenge we may have faced is that half of the leaders were not invited, half of the leaders were invited.
Why you?
And really that was in the public domain. Maybe that was not part of the privacy. Because I saw letters flying all over, some of them criticizing, others supporting. And well, I don't know whether we still managed to be able to put the region together and to speak in the same language or to be on the same page. Yeah, but then in politics, really, these private meetings have to happen every other day. I'm told today there is also another forum happening for leaders who subscribe to a certain thinking. They are congregating, I think, in Karen. I don't know whether these are the people you would call the hustler movement. We have seen again that reported, and really we are likely to see a lot of these happening, groupings and private meetings happening from time to time. I'm sure also from the handshake side and also from the BBI side, you're likely to also see meetings happening. Yeah, so I think really that's what we're having.
Well, all right. Well, that one I think it's almost hard to, know whether indeed in these meetings that some of these people are told go out there and be as radical as possible in defense of what it is that we are preaching, or our faith, as Barack would put it. But yes, there's also one that is expected. Right Honorable Raila Odinga is proceeding to Kisumu also to try and drum up support for the BBI initiatives. Let's see whether it sails through or not. But even as we look at those events of the day, before we drop on this particular animosity and intolerance we witness, the NCIC push to tame intolerance. The latest, of course, saying that they're going to, ensure that people land in the list of shame. Some of them have already done that. You get there 3 times, then you will not be allowed to hold any political office or even be part of the civil service. But what's important, or what's interesting to note, Mheshimiwa, is that It's barely a week since this was mentioned, and then the politicians are equally out here, uttering words without really caring about what the repercussions of the same then would be. Is it a show that probably they are certain that this is not going to do anything, this is not even legit, there's really nothing that is going to come out from the threats that are coming from the NCIC?
The NCIC is toothless, actually. But if they really want to act, they can act. But I think initially, its inception was just to be as a deterrent. But they have failed to act. And for them to be a deterrent, they must act and actually get some big wigs behind bars. Once they do that, then their deterrent presence will be felt. But before they do that, then their deterrent effect will not be felt at all. Yeah. But let's just going back, I had to Google what Muluka said about a kakistocracy. Kakistocracy, and I find it very interesting. Yeah. A state or society governed by its least suitable or competent citizens. And that reflects Kenya completely.
100%.
Yes, and it's very, very sad. But then that explains why we are unable to get direction, where we are unable to actually put our act together. Right. And that also explains why we are a country of mainly just sloganeering and not affecting anything. Very good slogans, but nothing comes out of it. Right. Because we entice the vote with that sloganeering, but we don't really mean to act on anything. So I think it's a dangerous place we are in. And I've always said that one of the biggest problems we face in Kenya is that we have monetized our politics to the extent that almost the good quality people don't want to participate. Yeah. And I remember my own personal presentation to the BBI team. I actually vouched for a change to a proportional representation system, so that parties then have a list, and that list you don't just get onto it. Okay. You must be properly vetted by all, so that whoever gets on that list is somebody of integrity, somebody who is going to be of use to running this country. But then they felt that because Kenya has been on a fast past the post election for so long, changing to that might be difficult, and the countries that already have that, like South Africa, are also trying to go to fast past the post. But then you look at Europe, most of them are actually proportional representation. And you find that their governance goes on very well. Okay. Britain with a fast past the post, France with a fast past the post, you can see their volatile politics. Right. So I think we really need to relook at this thing, because this monetized politics that we are having, I saw the leader of ODM the other day saying this is voter bribery. That's what we've had since independence. And it's not going to help us at all. Just because I'm a successful businessman and I have a lot of money, or wherever I've got the money from, you might not know, and I use it to get elected. Right. Now, with that kind of character, how do you expect me to bring a change to the governance system of the country? Okay. So there is a problem. There's a fundamental problem, and unless as Kenyans we face it, because when we hear things like this is the time for the hustlers to lead and so on. Actually, the electoral system is what will matter. Because if that hustler doesn't have money, then somebody else will have to give him that money. And whoever gives him that money, therefore, will control this fellow. Okay. This fellow will never be open-minded. So we actually have a fundamental problem with our politics. And unless we address it, I'm afraid if we think we've had a bad run because of COVID, we'll have a worse run in future. Okay. Especially with this kakistocracy kind of thing.
So probably this speaks volumes on why we still remain puppets of the West, years and years down after gaining independence, and in their own special way, they watch and probably run the activities. Just how best can we get ourselves out of this, even as we look at how maybe toothless, as he says, the security agencies could be in terms of addressing the animosity that we have?
I think the narrative about the West is quite often overdone.
Okay.
Because We are not the only society that has experienced colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever we discuss our situation, as someone who wants to lay some claim to scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
I always like to do a comparative analytical approach.
Okay.
That I look at our situation and I look at situations elsewhere. I make comparisons and eventually see what is it that is unique in our context.
In having the hand of the West, do you suppose there's anything unique out of all the African countries that we have on board? Looks like they still linger on and they drive the activities without a doubt.
Look, small countries that are coming out of war-torn situations, their own levels of autocracy notwithstanding, such as little Rwanda here in the backyard. Apart from an inclination towards heavy-handedness on the part of President Kagame,
Mm-hmm.
they are already leap years ahead of us.
Mm.
What is the problem? They were under colonialism for a long time, under Belgian colonialism, under French colonialism. If you look at little Botswana down south, they seem to be doing a lot better than we are. And then the entire continent of Africa has at some point been under colonialism. If we look at Ethiopia here, which really never experienced colonialism apart from a very fleeting Italian occupation. We look at Liberia, which was never under colonialism for a single moment. What is wrong with us? There's a certain kind of irresponsibility on the part of the citizen. It's a citizen who does not demand accountability and high standards from the leaders. A citizen who is very easily swayed.
Okay.
And I know that I'm wading into dangerous space because there are fellow scholars who will say, but you're talking about a citizen who has been traumatized, who have been dehumanized to the extent that he or she is no longer able to make a rational decision. And hence our playing along with the warlords. And these things, Linda, which I'm saying, and viewers and my colleagues about warlordism, they should be taken seriously. Because 2022 is at hand. And when you look at the landscape, what is happening, you see that we are already beginning to mobilize. The hustler is trying to position what you may want to call a class struggle perspective, and saying, no, it is a class struggle. It is the hustler class against the dynasties. The other people on the other side, whether they are dynasties or not, or howsoever they perceive themselves, are mobilizing under the old arrangement, which is an ethnic arrangement formation. You look at the BBI, and there are many things in the BBI, admittedly. As Barak, my analysis gives me the conclusion that there's what is at the core, and which is the executive and executive control. And then there is what is in the periphery, which are basically sweeteners that help us to see it go through. And what's at the core is about formation of a mechanism for ethnic mobilization that is less corrosive than what we have had in the past. And therefore, you can have the big five all the time mobilizing. You must consolidate your community. Today, Odinga is consolidating his. But he has it. He's just going to tell them that everything is fine.
Don't you view that as a positive trajectory then, coming from where we are?
I have not yet gotten to the level of value addition.
Okay.
If you just
Let's
give me
listen.
1.5 minutes, I will get to the level of value addition.
That it brings, yes.
Musalia Mudavadi has been trying. We have read that he has just finished a 3-day tour of Western. Uhuru Kenyatta was in Central, and he was not pretentious at all.
Yeah.
He said things like, I am going to be part of the succession conversation. I'll be at that table.
Yeah.
I want to leave this region in a certain place. Remember, this is the elected president, head of state of the republic. And he's also saying, wanasema wanaweza kutupa mawe, hata wanaenda kupiga Raila na mawe. Unafikiri wewe ndio uko na mawe peke yako?
We also do have.
Now, what is that? As a linguist, unafikiri wewe ndio uko na mawe peke yako? Hata mimi msinione hivi, ni vile tu wengine tumekuwa wazee. Nilikuwa mkali sana. What are you saying? So, it's keeping it within the loop for the 5, and the 5 may not be necessarily the ones we are seeing in a BBI now, because actually the other side could also use the same formula. And the rest are being told, but for you, don't worry, even if you will never get this thing, you will have your 35%, and which is a pipe dream. So is it a positive thing? When you alienate the rest of the country, Chinua Achebe tells us in the little thing called Trouble with Nigeria, that you treat other people, other communities, as if they are rubbish. But the day comes when the rubbish catches fire, and there's trouble all around.
All right.
So is it a good thing?
Certainly not from your analogy. All right, Honorable Kagushia, coming to you. Let's talk BBI briefly. Even as Parliament gets back from recess, members of Parliament are trooping back to Parliament. Tomorrow is when the action starts. On top of the agenda, they say, or from what it is that we've heard from the few we've spoken to, is the BBI, the talk on Ruto's impeachment, and so much so. Picking up from the previous speakers and just looking at what your expectations are, one, do you suppose that the BBI will sail through to the level of Parliament as it stands and where it is at the level of the counties?
Well, first I want to say that when I listen to Barack, a lot of times I also learn from him as much as we debate with him. I like listening to him even as we are debating, I must say. You ask me a difficult question as to whether BBI will pass through the county assemblies to the level of the parliament, probably the national parliament, and also the Senate. And I think every other county assembly should and will be acting individually and as per their standing orders and lawfully, so to say. And I know last week we did have a meeting that we conducted of the County Assemblies Forum. Earlier on, the County Assemblies Forum had taken a very serious stand on important matters that have been part of their conversation for quite a long period of time. Yeah, but I think what has happened also is that the county assemblies now did resolve that every county assembly should now go and debate the BBI bill in their county assemblies freely and without putting any conditions, and to do so legally and lawfully. But so what we expect is that every other county assembly will have the opportunity to consider that. Nyeri County Assembly, for example, we are resuming tomorrow from the long recess, and immediately we resume tomorrow, we will be laying on the table the bill, the BBI bill, as of tomorrow. And what we expect is that we'll be able to fast track the bill within the next couple of weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, so that we can be able to have it debated and then members will take a vote and make a decision as per their conviction, as per what they feel is right. And that is exactly what we expect of all the other county assemblies to do. What I know is that if the county assemblies are able to raise 24 number, which will approve this bill, then when it is in the National Assembly and also in the Senate, it will really not matter as to whether they vote it in, or they approve or they don't approve. The president will have to take a step to take the process to the next level at the IEBC, who will then have to declare a referendum so that the public can vote. And so on matters whether it goes through or not, I would want to leave that really to the individual county assemblies to make their own decisions.
I'd push you further to tell us what you expect of Nyeri, but you've really tried to approach this with a lot of decorum and sobriety in comparison to the members of county assemblies I had the other day who were straight to it. They said, after the Sagana meeting, I was against it, but I am now for it. After the Sagana meeting, nothing convinced me, I'm not going to go for it. All these were members of county assembly from the mountain.
Well, and unlike the members of the county assembly, I am a speaker. And as a speaker, I am going to be doing an extremely sacred and extremely delicate balancing act.
Yes.
Because we do have extremes in our assemblies. We have members who are pro, we have others who may be against.
Yeah.
And so I find myself in a very delicate position where I may not necessarily be able to take a position. Because if I do so, then how then do I moderate the debate in the county assemblies? And how then do I ensure that we remain as neutral as possible so that then we do not have to put our opinion on one side or the other? So I choose really to allow the members of the county assembly to be the one to steer the debate. And as a speaker, and I would also advise all the other speakers to restrain as much as practically possible, even when there's a very serious conviction to take a certain side. I would really want to urge our speakers to not to take a side in this case, so that we allow members of the county assembly to freely debate this bill, and then to also come up with the resolution that is required. The only thing I can also say is that as county assemblies and the speakers, what we will also be doing is to facilitate the debate in a good way, and also facilitate for public participation, where the members of the public can also have their say in this bill. Of course, unfortunately, at this level, whatever they say the public may have will not affect content of the bill, because at this point, then we are just going to be doing it as a motion, not really as a bill that goes through all the processes, because we are not likely, or we are not expected to change anything in this bill. So for that reason, then, what the public says will be, we can only influence probably how a member votes for the bill or against the bill, but not really influence the content of this bill. So there we are, and then we are expecting to see a very interesting time ahead, because I'm expecting that a lot of the county assemblies are likely to be placing this bill on the table for the next in the next 1 week, and so we are expecting probably in the next 1, 2, 3 weeks we are going to have a lot of activities in most of the county assemblies dealing with this matter, as well as they also deal with the other regular matters that the county assemblies have to deal with.
All right. Well, we leave it at that, but not forget to discuss individuals. Unfortunately, we keep saying that we should run away from discussing individuals. But then again, Barack has mentioned something to do with the Big Five, who probably would inform what direction we take as a country, even as we eye 2022. As we have this conversation, we have individuals that are at the heart of this conversation. We have the DP himself, we have Right Honorable Raila Odinga, and his last conversation in regards to 2022, he argues that he will not say anything about his political plans come 2022 until he sees the BBI document sail through. What do you make of that statement?
It's not a strange statement, because even also many of us politicians who are in competitive elective competition,
yeah.
many have not made up their decision. Their way forward.
They're waiting for
whether the BBI goes through or not. That's what will determine whether they'll run for this seat or the other. So because it has a profound change in the kind of governance system. So it's not just Right Honorable Raila who is saying that. Many of us are saying that we are waiting for the outcome.
He's almost certain that this document is going to sail through that aspect.
I think we've sort of lost some track here. Let's look at how did this BBI issue come about. I happen to have been a co-chair of both previously COD, then NASA. And by the time of the repeat election, we were actually now talking of secession or at the worst, federation, federalism. What was causing all that? It was this feeling that two communities have monopolized the nation's leadership to the exclusion of the others. And the feeling therefore was that it's better for the others to secede and run their own show, or at the worst, accept federalism for the way forward. So what the BBI is trying to do to ameliorate this is that if that were to go through the BBI, then it will be that apart from the big 5 communities that Barack Muluka was talking about, you have also the ministers who are also coming in there, so that some communities will be represented by the ministers, so that at least each of them has a feeling that they have a share in that government. Because if you realize that from the onset of the Jubilee government, the cabinet has been skewed towards 2 communities, and that's a fact we can't run away from. So actually trying to cure, or not really cure, to ameliorate the situation of tribalism. That's the attempt that's being made. Nobody has put on the table any other way of ameliorating the extreme tribalism in this country. It won't go away. Even if you talk about hustler, what, the tribalism won't go away. The tribalism is so ingrained in us. So we need to find a way of ameliorating that. So unless somebody comes with a better alternative of how to ameliorate that, because just appealing to the goodwill of the Kenyan politician to stop the tribalism will not be good, as we agreed from, as Barack said from the word go. Kenya is becoming a kistocracy. So you don't expect these people to actually bring those kinds of changes. So we need to really look at it deeply. Yes, tribalism is the scourge of this country. How do you ameliorate it so that eventually you are able to have everybody involved, and everybody feels that they are getting a share of whatever the national cake is. And that's where the 35% comes in. Now, there are those who argue that there isn't even 15% now, but that's assuming that COVID is going to last forever. And that's assuming that the next government that comes in will borrow so much like the Jubilee government has done. With all this, we expect to clear up. We expect this to clear up. And on the other hand, we cannot wait for the magnanimity of whoever will be president to decide that, okay, the Constitution says not less than 15%, so I'm going to give 40%. That's their magnanimity. It's not written in law. We have to have something in law so that nobody can play around with it. So these are the things that we are looking at, because we have to say, we have a problem. This is the solution that has come for us. Do you have an alternative that will solve the same problem? Because if your alternative is hustler, then that does not stop the problem of Kenya of tribalism. It doesn't answer. Yes, it changes the conversation, but it does not. Just because the conversation has changed doesn't mean the problem has been solved. So we need to look at it as well. That's why some of us are proponents of BBI, because when you look at it, when you talk of 35%, then they say, oh, you can't even give 15%. But we are awake to the fact that the economy is doing badly, and not just Kenyan economy, it's the world over. And we are aware that the borrowing also affected the economy. And this cannot go on forever. Because remember, when Mwai Kibaki took over, Kenya was more or less at the place where we are now. But because of his understanding of economics, he managed to turn the thing around. So we don't expect that it will go on forever. And then what about the tribalism? We cannot paper over the tribalism in the country by saying now we have changed the conversation. We are talking about hustler, the rich and the poor. Now we've changed the conversation. Yes, you might change the conversation, but have you solved the problem? Because the fact that the highest poverty index is in the western part of the country. By changing the conversation to hustler, have you improved that economy? Have you improved their income?
Linda, as someone who flatters myself with the belief that I associate myself with scholarship, I want to just now bring this conversation around two notions.
Okay.
The first one is the notion of selective amnesia. Amnesia is loss of memory. And selective amnesia is where we selectively forget. We choose to forget conveniently. And the second one is called selective hyperopia. Hyperopia is memory of history, historical happenings. When we look at 2007, we look at 2017, and we look at the violent conflict around those 2 years.
Yeah.
Was it really about two tribes dominating Kenyan leadership?
It was about 1 against 40 against 1 and all that, in a way.
I don't think so. That was the campaign rhetoric. Okay. But the conflict was about stolen elections. Such that when I look at the BBI, one of the things I expect to be seeing in the BBI is something like they say, the servers must be opened. Up to now, IEBC has never opened those servers against the instructions of the court. That there was an election, it was perceived to have been stolen by one of the major players, and that major player decided that he was not going to participate in the repeat election. He was not going to participate in the repeat election, not because he feared that the other two tribes would win the election, but because he looked at the arrangement and he saw that the election was going to be stolen again. The BBI has not addressed the matter of stealing elections. Now, this is the point. It doesn't matter whether you have 5 in the executive. You can have 2 teams. Each team will have its 5. Team Hustler will have their 5. Team ODM BBI will have their 5. If the election is perceived to be stolen, regardless that executive has been expanded, you will have the same problem that you had before. Unless we are hearing that if you now steal the election, because you are going to distribute the cake or the benefits among 5, then it doesn't matter. We can live with that. What the BBI sprang up from as the springboard was a stolen election, a flawed election, or perceptions, because we are not even clear whether the election was stolen or not. I expected that there would be some investigation into that to see whether the election...
Well, probably the handshake came in to quell that, because then if we're talking of strategies of redemption, then sometimes some things are left, or some stones are left and are better left in
the sense then that when we kill the stag, we will keep sharing it among ourselves. And you go and mobilize your tribe. You have got maybe about 6 million votes. I go and mobilize my tribe. We bring on board maybe another 2 to 3 million votes. Then we can shop for a few votes from this tribe and the other tribe. And together we can rule this country forever. Now, if you tell me that that is a solution, they are the so-called small tribes that are going to keep on incubating bitterness. When you look at what happened in Liberia in 1981, you had the dominance of what you call the Americo-Liberian tribe, the Tubman family. Yeah, the family of President Tubman and Tolbert. It was called the Tubman-Tolbert dynasty, the unmentionable word. And then you had Sergeant Samuel Doe, who came from a small tribe.
Yeah.
And the small tribes were feeling like they have been left out. And they got to a point where they said, we can no longer accept this.
Okay.
And he overthrew, in a most bloody manner, the Tubman-Tolbert dynasty of Liberia, which had ruled Liberia way before Africa started knowing what we call independence today, and I use what we call independence deliberately. Yeah, and then after that, Liberia is still where it is. There must be a way in which you look at the inequalities in society and how you are going to address them. The worst form of class conflict is when the class becomes equated to the tribe.
Right. Okay.
It is much better when the class conflict cuts across all tribes, then we can still have a conversation.
Okay.
But when the class, the dominant class or the dominated class or the dominating class is a composite of a few tribes, my friends, we are incubating disaster. And this we can tell Kenyans for free today, thanks to this platform, before we get there.
Right.
Because one day they are going to say, what walisema.
Well, okay. Honorable Kagusha, we come to you, picking it up from what the gentlemen have said and probably expounding it further, and also looking at the individual, because then we're also discussing individuals, the individual in Honorable William Ruto, and the conversation that arrived right now. I'm sure yours would be a specialty at the level of the county, but then we observe what is happening at the national level. And when we're having conversations of impeachment, then one would probably want to get an overview. Probably you'd school us today on just what are the constitutional procedures to getting out the DP from office before his term ends, because then he equally was elected alongside President Uhuru Kenyatta. And just how much of an opening does he have for him to proceed and say that, you know what, I would resign because indeed it is too hot in the kitchen?
Well, I think the issue of impeachment of the deputy president or any other at this particular moment is misleading the public. One of the constitutional requirements of a leader of that caliber, probably a president or a deputy president or even a governor, is that the threshold of impeaching such a leader is quite high. One must have engaged in gross misconduct. They must have disregarded international laws or even national laws. And they must have contravened the Constitution grossly. And in this case, I have had the issue of impeachment coming from political leaders. And I have not had any mention of any of the constitutional threshold that is supposed to be met. And so in the first place, without that, I do not think that debate ought to even be encouraged. Because I think what we are having is a face-off between the pro-handshake and anti-handshake parliamentarians. And I think the deputy president want to make a statement today by again mobilizing all the friendly members of parliament who cut across again the political divide, the tribal divide. And by doing this, you find that he's trying to clearly indicate that the issue of impeachment is not even going to be possible. And at this point, I think the country ought to concentrate a little bit more on looking at the merits and the demerits of the BBI document, which I think has been over-politicized. And by over-politicizing this document, you find that people have missed the content of the document. And the concentration has been much more on posturing for 2022. And so the issue of impeachment at the moment does not have anything to do with actual impeachment, but much more of posturing for the purposes of having what the newspapers are portraying as a big fight. Is a matter of trying to show like we're in a contest, doing early campaigns, doing early political contest, and this is going to be helping the politicians to keep the country politicized for the purposes of their 2022 political games. So I think it's still premature to even discuss the issues of any impeachment of any person in the country at the moment. And again, we're also nearing the end of this term of the Jubilee government. I think what we have had, and what has gone wrong has gone wrong, what has gone right has gone right. And I think now we need to look at the remaining term to consolidate really what Jubilee manifesto stood for, so that with this we can have a conclusion of the term of Jubilee government.
Well, the gentlemen in studio are wondering whether indeed we ought to have a conversation revolving around the manifesto at all, and whether it has done anything, so to speak. As many would argue, maybe the Jubilee government has done so much, so it's just that then the political shenanigans that play around, sort of put up a cloud that bars, the people to get to see some of these things that they have done. But speaking of impeachment, categorically the Jubilee party argues that they do not have any plans. This is courtesy of what it is that has been said by the Secretary General, Raphael Tuju. They have no plans of impeaching the DP. This conversation culminating from ANC and the likes of Wiper, that is those sides of Kalonzo Musyoka. And then the question then would be, these individuals, what is their role in the current politics of the day, even as there are talks of a push for Musalia presidency? That is also one thing that I would have loved for us to go through or to talk about, but I hope that we will be discussing it as time, as and when time allows us. Also, President Uhuru Kenyatta as an individual, and I mean what his fate would look like, courtesy of the BBI. But gentlemen, time is not on my side. I'll allow you 30 seconds to probably give us parting shots in regards to the conversation, or generally what else you'd love for the people to hear. Honorable Deseli Simiyu.
I think the matter of impeachment should be set aside because it might end up as a vote of confidence. So the best thing is they set it aside, then wait for 2022, so that now collectively we vote out Jubilee and any person who was associated with Jubilee, which includes the DP, because they have actually wrecked this country. So let's not bother with impeachment. Let's work out there and campaign out there, so that we collectively now impeach Jubilee in 2022 August by throwing them out and throwing out anybody who was associated with Jubilee.
School us some more, Barak, in regards to the impeachment conversation that we have, and also relate that to what has been happening in the United States. I'd really love for the people and for me myself to also get to understand. I mean, these proceedings are still on even when Trump is out of office. Just what is in this word impeachment?
So that ultimately one is really declared completely unfit to hold office. Trump is out, but he could still make a comeback.
A comeback, okay.
So you want to put him away completely, lock, stock, and barrel, so that he never shows up again. It's in the interest really of the top notch in the Republican Party to ensure that he's locked out, but they're of course thinking also about the electorate. But back here, essentially the dwarfs must also strive for relevance. If you can go out and shout that we are going to impeach you, then you start attracting headlines. As I have worked around, Ayub Sabula and Musalia Mudavadi, and I can say with a lot of confidence and certainty that Sabula has not discussed this matter with Mudavadi anywhere. These are his own stamp pronouncements, and their attention-seeking gimmicks, which attention he has received, but I don't think it will go very far. very finally, the Jubilee government collapsed a long time ago. There is no such thing as a Jubilee government. There is Kieleweke and there is Tanga, and they are completely in conflict with one another. What keeps us rolling is that we still have a modicum of a functional civil service, a functional public service that keeps on rolling, taking us forward. I don't know how far it could go before it grinds to a halt. In terms of that which we may want to call the executive, we have an informal government. An informal government that has got President Uhuru Kenyatta as president, Raila Odinga as co-president, and it is informal because they have not used any known instruments of law to formalize them. But you still see Raila Odinga inspecting and giving a stamp of good life to projects. He goes to Galana Kulalu and he says, yes, this is good. He goes
in his capacity as special envoy.
Special envoy dealing with food and irrigation.
Irrigation now, that's another thing. Infrastructure, he's his infrastructure actually.
I understand when he accompanies President Uhuru Kenyatta to China to try and get a loan for the SGR, which the Chinese say no, but he didn't go as infrastructure envoy. Where else in Africa are you hearing him doing those things that they are talking about? He's part of the informal government. It's a very convenient place to be in. When it suits you, you can go to Likoni and issue instructions on the dredging. You can go to Kisumu to inspect the port. You can go to Kisumu to inspect the stadium. When it doesn't fit you, you can distance yourself and direct attacks, oblique ones, at the president, but you pretend to be attacking the deputy. And so I would tend to agree with Eselesimu that maybe then let the season come so that you reject the whole thing. In Kiswahili, they say jongo mtupe na mti wake.
Well, over and above, the question of who's fooling who lingers around, and we all wait for that moment when we'll all know just what direction we take as people. In the studio, Dr. Barak Muluka, Communications Advisor, Honorable Eselesimu, Member of Parliament Tongaren, and joining us via Skype, John Kahushia, Speaker in Nyeri County. It was good to have you this morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much as always, as we look forward to another Monday where we ponder some more on matters that are of importance to us. It's now time that we take a short break. Remember, it is that time that we have a commemoration, that is international commemoration of epilepsy, and so we'll be having that discussion after this break, and we get to learn some more on this.